Port Miradeen never slept, but there were hours when even its noise dropped to a low, steady murmur, like a heart at rest. In one of those quieter cycles, between the late freighter arrivals and the morning shuttle rush, a little girl pressed her nose to a view panel and fogged its surface with her breath. "Amira, careful," her mother said gently. "You'll leave prints." Amira Solanki did not move. Beneath her small brown hands, the curve of the transparent alloy framed a vast jungle of metal, cranes swinging in slow arcs, cargo pods drifting in guided lines. The long ribs of ships docked like sleeping sea creatures. Far below, in Docking Ring C, she saw a cluster of figures glowing faintly in blues and greens. "Them," Amira said. "They're singing again." Her father stepped up beside her, flicking his wrist to check the local time, more by habit than need. "The Talmeri like to work in groups," he said. "Makes them feel safer." "Do we make them feel unsafe?" Amira asked. Her father hesitated. The word no came easily, but he was a man of the Dharma frontier, used to the raw edges where species first met. He settled on, "Sometimes everyone feels unsafe around everyone else, until they get used to each other." Amira squinted against the glass. "That one has spirals on their arms." Her mother followed her pointing finger. "Then maybe they're an artist." She rested a hand on Amira's shoulder. "Come on, we should check the local market before breakfast. They have candies here you can't get at home." Amira did not move. The glow of the Talmeri fascinated her more than sweets. They were a soft, aquatic species, shaped for buoyant seas rather than metal corridors. Their skin carried patterns of phosphorescent color that rippled when they spoke or shifted mood. To a child from a dusty frontier rock with harsh yellow sunlight and sparse scrub, they looked like walking pieces of the night sky. Down below, Kelriin doled out instructions in the Talmeri's musical tongue, voice rising and falling in chords that carried through the dock's thin atmosphere. They were not an artist, not by any formal standard, but the patterns of light on their limbs were intricate. Spirals and interwoven rings, marks of a small coastal community on Selyrion that had once believed deeply in the tides. Kelriin still believed in some things. They believed you helped those who stood near you in storms, no matter the species. They believed in work done well, in cargo nets tied safely, in schedules met. They did not yet believe in how suddenly a life could pivot. Kelriin called a Talmeri supervisor, their glow pulsing a firm yellow. "We are behind schedule on berth 9. Less talking, more moving." Kelriin flushed a soft, chagrined green and waved back. They had let their attention drift up to the observation deck, where the human child watched with unwavering focus. She had been there for 3 cycles now, at least for part of each working shift, her small face pressed to the glass like a fish staring at a world beyond water. Humans amused Kelriin. They were angular, all sharp bones and tightly knotted muscles, wrapped in fabrics that did not show mood. Their voices sounded like falling stones, rough consonants, but their laughter came easily. The child had waved once. Kelriin had pretended not to notice, out of shyness more than rudeness, but the gesture had stuck in their mind. Now, as they hooked a cargo pod to the mag rail, Kelriin felt the familiar tremor of the station underfoot. Port Miradeen sighed and shifted, gravity compensators humming, air systems ticking through their quiet routines. On the observation deck, Amira shifted her weight from one foot to the other, restless. Around her, the corridor smelled faintly of recycled air and the spice from a nearby food stall. Her mother and father were arguing in low voices about whether to risk a trip to the Free Trade Bazaar 3 decks down. "Just a quick look," her father said. "We'll stay in the central ring." "It's rowdy," her mother replied. "And there's that cargo strike. I don't want her crushed in a crowd. She's not glass, Nandini. Amira, you want to see the bazaar?" Amira didn't answer. Her breath had left a small clouded circle on the glass. She wiped it away with her sleeve and pressed closer. The Talmeri, with spirals on their arms, looked up as if feeling her gaze. Kelriin saw the child again, saw the way she leaned forward, saw her lips form a sound, some human word Kelriin did not know, but the meaning was clear enough. "Hello." On impulse, Kelriin raised one hand. Fingers spread in the Talmeri gesture of greeting, glow rippling pale blue. The child's face broke into a grin. She turned, tugged fiercely at her father's sleeve, pointing down, words spilling out too fast for Kelrion to follow through the glass. Her father looked, smiled, answered her. Then everything shook. The first explosion was a deep, gut-level thump, felt before heard. The deck lurched sideways under Kelrion's feet, nearly throwing them into the cargo pod. A ribbon of fire and vapor burst from a fuel line at the far end of Docking Ring C, engulfing 3 stacked freight containers. The protective shields flickered, then failed. Superheated gas roared into the open air. On the observation deck, the windows flared white as emergency shutters tried to descend. They were old, slow hardware. The designers had never quite believed in worst cases. The second explosion tore through the floor plates. Bulkheads started to slam shut across the station, answering automated sensor screams. Compartmentalization was meant to save lives, seal the breach, starve the fire. But people were in the way. Amira felt the world jump under her. She heard her mother shout her name, felt a hand grab for her sleeve and miss. The floor tilted, her feet skated, and she slid away from her parents, toward the corridor junction that was now a tunnel of smoke. The ceiling lights went red. An alarm klaxon hammered the air. "Amira!" her mother screamed, lunging. A support beam dropped down, shuddering into place, cutting her off. Amira coughed as a wave of hot air hit her. The far end of the corridor filled with smoke so thick it looked solid. She could hear hissing, a sound like something huge sucking in breath. The emergency doors along the passage began to move, heavy panels grinding shut. Port Miradeen's central management system did its best. It rerouted power, tried to isolate the breach. It did not know there was a human child in Section C3, caught between a fire and a closing door. Kelrion knew only what their eyes showed them. A blossoming inferno at the far end of the ring, a section of hull peeled back, and alarm icons flickering red over docking corridor C3. They heard, faintly, the shriller alarm of decompressing air. "Everyone to safe zones," shouted the Talmeri supervisor. "Docking Ring C is compromised." Workers dropped tools and ran for the nearest sealed hatches. A human dock officer yelled into a hand comm, then sprinted after them. The air tasted of burning insulation, bitter and electric. Kelrion turned toward the safe corridor. They hesitated. On the deck above, behind layers of metal and composite and transparent shield, a human child had waved at them. On stations like this, children stayed close to their parents. Parents stayed close to exits. It was safer, smarter, more likely. More likely. The alarm over C3 shrieked again, insistent. Kelrion saw, in their mind's eye, a small face pressed to glass, eyes wide. "Kelrion!" their supervisor shouted. "Move!" Kelrion ran, but not toward the safe hatch. They sprinted toward the nearest access ladder, hands grabbing at rungs that had become suddenly slick with vibration. The ladder well trembled around them. A line of Talmeri workers pushed past in the other direction, their glow jagged with fear. "You are going the wrong way," one cried. "There is a child," Kelrion answered, already 3 rungs up, "on the viewing deck." "Security will get them," another shouted. Kelrion did not slow. Security was on the far side of the collapsing ring. The bulkheads were closing. The mental map of Docking Ring C they had built over years of work unfolded before them, showing pressure doors, emergency seals, blind corridors. C3 was narrow. It would close fast. Kelrion burst out onto the viewing deck access corridor into a red-lit fog. Smoke curled along the ceiling, shunted by struggling ventilators. Humans staggered past, some limping, some carrying others. A station officer in a charred uniform waved evacuees toward a safe hatch. "Section C3 is sealing," he shouted into his comm. "We still have people inside." Kelrion pushed by him, ignoring his startled curse. "Child," they gasped. "Small human child." The officer grabbed their arm. "It's sealed. You can't." A high, thin cough came from down the corridor, from beyond a half-lowered emergency door. "Amira!" A woman's voice screamed from the other side of a thick bulkhead. "Amira, answer me." The officer swore and let go. "Doors jammed. We don't have cutters here. They're..." I do not need cutters, Kelrion said. They ran. The emergency door in front of them hung crooked in its frame. Lowered to waist height, its lower edge warped by a heat blister in the floor. Beyond it, the corridor swam in smoke. Lights flickered. The far end was a hellish glare, where the fire chewed its way closer. The atmospheric hiss grew louder. The corridor was bleeding air. On the other side, small hands scrabbled at the floor, fingers feeling blindly for the slim gap under the door. Kelrion dropped to their knees and slid on their side, pushing into the narrowing space as the massive door shuddered downward in fits and starts. The hot edge burned against their shoulders. Metal scraped glowing lines down their bioluminescent skin. They forced their torso under, exhaling, flattening themselves. The door ground lower, pinning their ribcage. Pain shot through them, sharp and bright. Smoke poured over their face. Kelrion's outstretched hand brushed small fingers. They grabbed Amira's wrist, pulled. The door dropped another fraction. Bone grated. Kelrion did not let go. Amira coughed, eyes streaming. The world had become noise and heat and terror. The glowing person from below was here, suddenly, their face inches away, eyes wide and shining, colors strobing in frantic patterns. Breathe shallowly. Kelrion rasped in, halting trade tongue. I have you. They braced one heel against the doorframe and pushed, straining. The warped metal gave a centimeter. It was enough. Kelrion dragged Amira through, ignoring the scrape of the deck against the child's knees, ignoring the white-hot line of the door edge cutting into their own flesh. The moment they felt her clear, they yanked themselves backward, a desperate wriggle, and rolled free as the door slammed the last of the way down with a teeth-rattling thud. The far end of the corridor crumpled inward. A vortex of debris and air roared past, howling against the sealed door. The station shuddered as the exposed section of ring tore away into vacuum. Silence fell, thick and uncanny, after so much noise. Only the deeper alarms remained, cycling endlessly. Kelrion lay on the floor, chest heaving, vision spotted with dark motes. Their arms were a mess of burns and crushed tissue. Each breath hurt, but there was a small, living weight against their side. Amira made a hiccuping sound, half sob, half cough, and clung to them, fingers digging into their skin. Her face pressed against the brighter patches of their glow. You are safe, Kelrion whispered, switching to the human language they had practiced in quiet hours, their accent heavy but clear. Stay still. The world blurred around them. Later, the images would be replayed 1,000 times. Security footage of an alien dockworker slamming their own body into a closing door, forcing it open with bare limbs, emerging with a soot-smeared human child in their arms. But in the moment, there were no spectators, no audience. There was only one being, acting on instinct, and another clinging to the first as the air cleared and the emergency lights stabilized. Admiral Kade watched the footage for the first time nearly 6 hours later in a makeshift command post hastily set up in a cargo lounge. At that moment, he was not yet an admiral. He wore the rank of captain on the shoulders of his uniform, his dark hair still unmarked by the subtle signs of age, his jaw unshaven from the long shift. "Run that back," he said quietly. The clip replayed. The Talmeri, identified as Kelrion in the incident report, dove under the closing door again and again, each frame a study in reckless commitment. One of the station's human administrators leaned over his shoulder. Docking Ring C failed catastrophically. The backup seals were 10 years overdue for replacement. If that door hadn't jammed, the kid would have been crushed. If it had closed faster, the Talmeri would have been cut in half. And if Kelrion hadn't done anything? Kade asked, though he knew the answer. The administrator shrugged, face tight. Then we'd be filling out one more casualty form. Kade's gaze lingered on the end of the clip, where medtechs arrived, and peeled the child away from the Talmeri's battered body. Even through the low resolution, he could see the way Amira reached back, fingers seeking Kelrion's, unwilling to break that last grip. "Status on the dockworker?" he asked. "Serious burns, crushed ligaments, some cracked bones. The station's facilities aren't equipped for full regen, but we've stabilized them." The administrator hesitated. "We were going to put them in stasis and ship them out on a later medical transport. Beds are limited in the premium care bays after this mess. Transfer them to my ship, Kade said without hesitation. We have spare capacity in the infirmary. Full treatment. Human standard. The administrator blinked. That's generous, Captain. Kade's mouth thinned. They didn't ask which standard of care the child was entitled to when they crawled under that door. He tapped the console. And make sure that gets on the net. With names. Kelriin, Amira Solanki. People deserve to know. His words carried more weight than he realized. By the time his ship cleared Port Miradeen's traffic mesh 2 days later, the story had already run across human networks. Segments replayed the footage between updates on trade routes and political disputes. Commentators praised Kelrian's bravery and instinctive moral courage. Kade watched one such broadcast in his tiny wardroom, coffee cooling between his hands, and recorded a brief message for his own superiors. Dockworker Kelriin of Selyrion risked their life for a human child with no expectation of reward, he said. Recommend we extend all courtesies to their people in future dealings. We owe them at least that much. He did not know then how far that small sentence would echo. Amira, sedated and bandaged, did not know she was at the center of a story. She only knew that when she woke in the medbay, there was a small, warm hand in hers. Kelriin lay on the adjacent bed, wrapped in regenerative gel, their glow dim but steady. She raised their joined hands slightly, eyes heavy. You came, she whispered. Kelrian's voice was a soft rasp in the darkened room. You waved first. She smiled and drifted back into sleep, fingers still tangled with theirs. Before Amira's parents took her home to the Dharma frontier, she left Kelriin a gift. It was a trinket, cheap metal and synthetic fiber, shaped like a tiny web of interlocking stars. A star-weave pendant her father had bought her in the bazaar, the one she had pressed into Kelrian's hand briefly in the chaos before the fire. Kelriin kept it. They did not fully understand why, but it felt important. Years passed. The galaxy moved on to other crises. Trade lanes shifted. Alliances formed and frayed. The story of a dockworker's heroism became a small, bright thread in a much larger tapestry. On Selyrion, the star grew sicker. Dr. Ndlovu knew before most. From an observatory perched above the methane plains of a distant human-aligned moon, she watched the spectral lines of Selyrion's sun twist into worrying shapes. Ahead of schedule, she murmured, fingers dancing over her console. You're going to blow before your time, old thing. She sent her findings up the chain. The star was entering a phase of violent instability far sooner than Talmeri predictions had indicated. Coronal mass ejections had already stripped several outer moons of their atmospheres. The planet's magnetosphere was straining. Her reports joined a chorus of similar warnings from other observatories. Models showed that within a few decades, maybe less, Selyrion's surface would become uninhabitable without massive intervention. Flares could bathe half the planet in lethal radiation. The Talmeri High Council acknowledged the data, then buried it under layers of cautious bureaucracy. Mass evacuations were logistically daunting and culturally terrifying. Their people were bound to their oceans by history and biology. Leaving meant leaving more than a world. It meant leaving the songs that had grown there. Councillor Savak, head of one of Selyrion's more conservative blocks, summarized the feeling in a private meeting. We will not stampede our people into the void because of human panic. We have time. We will study, negotiate, prepare. By the time they truly understood how little time remained, another shadow had fallen over their star. The Vorusk fleet arrived almost without warning. There had been rumors, of course. Stories of a predatory species with a taste for exploiting weak or endangered worlds. They came with sleek, jagged ships and efficient brutality, offering protection in exchange for resources, then tightening the noose. They preferred targets already destabilized by internal problems. Six stars and frightened governments made fertile ground. When Vorusk signal spikes appeared near the Ashen Rift, a dense region of space close to Selyrion, some Talmeri argued for immediate militarization. Others warned that arming themselves might provoke attack. Councillor Savak persuaded the council to send only a token defensive force and a diplomatic delegation. Show preparedness, but not aggression, they said. The Vorusk saw only opportunity. They swept out of the ashen rift with a lean, disciplined formation that made Talmeri observers shiver. Their lead ships dropped into Selyrion's orbital plane like knives. They destroyed the outer defense satellites in less than an hour, then broadcast a simple message on all frequencies. Your star is dying. Your military is weak. Your choices are surrender, partnership, or extinction. Panic rippled through Selyrian cities. The Talmeri had never been conquerors. They had fleets for exploration and commerce, not war. Their defensive platforms were old, maintained out of obligation rather than conviction. Vorusk ships took up positions at key jump points and trade arteries, a loose blockade that could tighten at any moment. Their ground forces remained in orbit, a threat without yet being a presence, like a raised fist that had not fallen. In a cramped office on a crowded human station, Admiral Kade listened to the translated Vorusk transmission and felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He had risen through the ranks in the years since the Port Miradeen disaster. His name carried weight now in the Sol Defense Armada. He was still known as a cautious tactician, more likely to map evacuation routes than glory strikes. But he held in his memory an image of a bioluminescent arm wedged under a closing door. He had never met Kelriin again. Data paths crossed, messages were lost, and life in the fleet left little room for personal pilgrimages. But he had not forgotten, nor had some of his colleagues. The story of Kelriin and Amira had become a parable in certain circles, about cross-species solidarity, about going toward danger for the sake of another. So, when reports came in of the Vorusk tightening their hold around a world called Selyrion, old files were pulled. Someone noticed a line in a report. Kelriin, origin, Selyrion. Someone else remembered Kade's firm recommendation years ago to honor that people. The message reaching Kade's desk was succinct. Talmeri homeworld endangered. Star unstable. Vorusk presence established. No formal treaty with humans in place. Request. Assessment of possible intervention. Military and humanitarian. He called up Selyrion star data and Dr. Ndlovu's latest research. He watched simulations of flares, lashing out like whips, scorching continents. "We step in," he said, almost before the question had fully formed. The liaison officer on the other end of the secure channel raised an eyebrow. "Without a treaty? The Council is reluctant to risk an interspecies war over a world that isn't ours." "This isn't about owning worlds," Kade replied. "It's about who we are." The liaison hesitated. "You'll need more than moral arguments. The Vorusk are no joke. They'll fight. And the star itself? Our projections show real risk to any fleet operating in close orbit. We could lose ships before firing a shot." "Then we design a plan that keeps us out of the kill radius as much as possible," Kade said. He gestured at the model of Selyrian's system floating above his desk. "But we go, quietly, if need be, under the banner of humanitarian relief, evacuations, escort, a shield between a predator and its prey." He thought of Amira as a child, soot-streaked, fingers linked to the glowing hand that had saved her. He had read follow-up reports years later. She had recovered, grown, joined the fleet. He opened his mouth, closed it again. He had an idea that was not, strictly speaking, regulation. "We can dress it up in strategy," he said more slowly. "Stabilizing points near a dying star gives us data we'll need when it happens to us. Testing that Solaris Loom project in a high-risk environment moves the science ahead. Securing a foothold near the Ashen Rift has obvious traffic benefits. Call it a multi-purpose operation with humanitarian and research components." "And the deeper reason?" the liaison asked, though he already knew. Kade met his gaze through the display. "Because when one of them saved one of ours, they didn't hesitate." Within the week, tasking orders flowed out across human-controlled space. Ship captains read them with varying degrees of surprise. The mission had an official name: Operation Dawnshield. Its public brief spoke of stellar stabilization tests, evacuation corridor security, and containment of an emerging predatory threat. Unofficially, in wardrooms and mess halls, another phrase spread: paying the debt. The ISS Far Step Endeavour was one of the first ships assigned. Captain Anka Sato stood on its bridge, hands clasped behind her back. As the details arrived, she was short, compact, with the expression of someone always counting variables. Her crew trusted her to make the right call when those variables turned against them. "We're the spear point?" she asked Kade during a secure briefing. "You're the needle," he corrected. "We're not trying to punch through a line so much as stitch corridors safe. Your job is to slip in, map the edges of the Vorusk net, and establish contact with sympathetic elements on Selyrion." He nodded to the others in the hollow briefing space. "Dr. Leon Ndlovu, Noah Ben-Ari, Arturo Velas, Sergeant Yusuf Darzi, Amira Solanki. Your forward science lead will be Dr. Ndlovu. She knows the star better than anyone outside the Talmeri's own academies. Noah Ben-Ari will handle systems integration for the Solaris Loom components. Arturo Velas has been seconded as your primary cultural liaison with the Talmeri. Sergeant Darzi, you'll coordinate marine detachments if things on the surface get ugly. And Ensign Amira Solanki will serve as your nav and comms bridge between all of them." Amira straightened at the mention of her name. Her hair was pulled back in a simple tie, her uniform plain, but there was a quiet intensity in her eyes. Kade watched her for a moment, seeing in her both the soot-streaked child and the disciplined officer she had become. "Questions?" he asked. "How much resistance from command are we expecting if this goes sideways?" Captain Sato asked bluntly. Kade's lips twitched. "Plenty. So let's do our best to make it go right. We're threading a needle between a dying star and an ambitious predator. We won't get a second chance to make a first impression on the Talmeri." Amira swallowed and raised a hand. "Sir, the Talmeri. Do we have any specific individuals we can reference to show this isn't just abstract policy?" Kade's gaze flicked to her, and for a heartbeat his expression softened. "Dockworker Kelriin, Port Miradeen," he said quietly. "You may remember them." Amira's throat tightened. Of course, she remembered. In nightmares and in quiet gratitude, she remembered the pressure of a glowing body pinning her down against a collapsing deck, the hiss of escaping air, the words, "You are safe." She had tried, in the years since, to find Kelriin. Letters had been sent via station administrators, routed through freight lines to Selyrion. Replies had been sporadic, then had ceased altogether as conditions on Selyrion worsened and the Vorusk presence grew. Now, hearing the name spoken in this context, she felt a fierce, almost painful hope. "Understood, sir," she said, her voice steady. The Far-Step Endeavor departed human space under the guise of a standard patrol, then shifted to silent running as it approached the Ashen Rift. Its hull bristled with antennae and folded frameworks, the skeleton of the prototype Solaris Loom. In the engineering bays, Noah Ben-Ari walked the length of the loom's components, hand trailing along the support struts. "It's not ready," she muttered. "It won't ever be ready, Doctor," Ndlovu replied dryly from beside her. "Not in the way you mean. Stars don't wait for tidy engineering schedules." Noah snorted. "Stellar metastructures should at least have the decency to pass all their ground tests before we bolt them onto a flagship and jump into a collapsing system." She spoke, but she worked. Cables were tightened, calibration routines run. They all knew the stakes. The Solaris Loom was designed to wrap around a star's magnetic field, feeding disturbance data to anchored platforms and, in theory, mitigating the most destructive outbursts by redistributing their energy along safer arcs. In theory. In practice, it had never been deployed near a star as unstable as Selyrian's. "If it fails, we lose a lot of expensive hardware," Noah said. "And?" Dr. Ndlovu asked. Noah met her gaze. "And a lot of people." "Then let's not let it fail," Dr. Ndlovu replied. Amira watched from the nav station as the Ashen Rift loomed on their displays. It was not literally visible. Out the windows, space looked as dark and indifferent as ever. But the sensors painted a vivid picture. Pockets of warped gravity, tangled electromagnetic fields, drifting relics of dead stars. Vorusk liked to lurk in messes like this? Sergeant Yusuf Darzi asked from the back of the bridge. Captain Sato nodded. Plenty of cover. Harder to track them. Easier to stage, surprise jumps. Keep your squads on rotation. If we get boarded, it'll be fast and ugly. Arturo Velas leaned lightly against a console, watching the sensor traces. The Talmeri will be watching too, he said. We should make sure the first thing they see is us not shooting. That depends on the Vorusk, Sato said. But yes, no sudden moves unless absolutely necessary. Amira's fingers danced over the controls, plotting a narrow course through gravitational eddies that could shred careless ships. Her heart beat faster than the careful rhythm of her training allowed. She caught her reflection in a dark panel. For an instant, she saw herself as that child again, peering through glass at a world bigger and stranger than she could grasp. Then, the moment passed. She exhaled, steadied her breathing, and guided the Endeavor into Selyrion system. The first glimpse of the Talmeri homeworld filled the main screen a few hours later. Selyrion was beautiful and wounded. Bands of clouds swirled over deep blue-green oceans, broken by chains of violet islands and white-capped waves. At the poles, faint auroral curtains shimmered, struggling against surges of radiation that made the sensors hiss with static. The star it orbited glared unnaturally bright, writhing with sunspots and flares. Dr. Ndlovu murmured to herself, eyes narrowed. It's worse, she said. Flare frequency is higher than last survey. Radiation belts are fat and lopsided. We stay too close for too long. Our hull will hum like a beehive. Closer to the planet, a ring of ships encircled the main jump vector like sharks around wounded prey. Vorusk, fleet signature, the tactical officer reported. Counting at least 18 capital ships, plus a cloud of smaller escorts and drones. They've left gaps, but they're narrow. They want traffic to keep flowing, Arturo observed. Keeps the Talmeri dependent. Let them think they can still trade, as long as they pay the toll. Let's make use of those gaps, Captain Sato said. Passive scans only. No shields up yet. We don't want to spook them. The Vorusk ships were harsh and angular, built for function over form, bristling with weapons. Their hulls bore no ornamentation, only serial markings, and the cold, efficient geometry of war. From one of those ships, Warlord Kharzun watched the approaching human signature and bared his teeth. Humans, he said, as if the word itself tasted sour. Late to the feast. An aide flicked talons over a console. Single capital-class vessel. Unusual framework attached. Power signatures suggest experimental equipment. Escorts are holding back, just outside the primary gravity well. So they're cautious, Kharzun said. Or they think one ship will be enough to frighten us away from our new property. He considered. The Vorusk had clashed with humans before, usually over border worlds. The humans were stubborn and inventive, but their appetite for conquest was erratic. They preferred cooperative agreements, shared ventures, levers of influence, rather than direct subjugation. Kharzun found it all inefficient. Open a tight beam, he ordered. I want to see what kind of posturing they try first. On the Endeavor's bridge, an incoming hail chimed. Vorusk origin, Amira said quietly. High priority. Captain Sato straightened. Put it through. The main screen flickered, then resolved into the image of Warlord Kharzun's face. Ridged. Predatory. Eyes like slivers of amber. Human vessel, he said, dispensing with preliminaries. You are entering a secured operational theater. The local species have requested our guidance and protection. State your business and your planned departure vector. Arturo stepped forward, inclining his head. This is Captain Anka Sato of the ISS Farstep Endeavor, operating under mandate from the Sol Defense Armada. We are here with two purposes: to study and mitigate the instability of this system's star, and to offer humanitarian assistance to any Talmeri who wish to evacuate. Kharzun's lips peeled back. It might have been a smile. A dying world is not your concern, he said. We have reached an agreement with the Talmeri Council. Their needs are being addressed. Your presence is unnecessary and unwelcome. Most of our agreements involve the other party still having full freedom of movement, Arturo said mildly. Blockades make us curious. Kharzun's eyes flicked sideways, taking in the loom frames attached to the Endeavor's hull. And that experimental contraption? Are you planning to leash the star? Our plans for the star are not your concern, Doctor. Ndlovu murmured under her breath. Sato lifted a hand to silence her. Aloud, Sato said, "We are not here to challenge your agreements with the Talmeri. We are here to offer options. If any Talmeri wish to leave, we will escort them safely out of the system. If your agreements allow for free emigration, surely this is no threat to you." Kharzun's gaze hardened. "You play with language. The Talmeri will do as their council decides, and their council has chosen to remain. No mass exodus. No destabilizing panic." He leaned closer to his pickup. "And certainly no foreign warships hovering over their cradle, pretending to be saviors." "Then let us speak directly with the council," Arturo said. "If they confirm that they do not wish us here, we will withdraw." Kharzun considered. There was confidence in his posture. He believed he controlled the council. He did, in fact, control much of it through threats and carefully structured dependencies. "Very well," he said. "I will convey your request. In the meantime, you will hold position no closer than this. Coordinates pinged on Endeavor's navigation display. A point just outside the densest band of Vorusk ships. Any attempt to break the perimeter will be treated as hostile." Sato's jaw tightened. "We are here in peace. We will hold your line for now. But understand this, Warlord. If we detect any genocide, any forced sterilizations, any mass killings, dressed up as necessary population management, we will not stand aside." Kharzun stared at her as if she were a curious insect. "You are in no position to threaten." He cut the channel without further word. Silence settled on the Endeavor's bridge. "We're in position," Amira said quietly. Her hands steadied on the controls, but her mind churned. Somewhere down there, beneath clouds and oceans, Kelrion might be listening to similar transmissions, might be watching strange new ships in their sky. "Arturo," Sato said, "start working diplomatic channels through any backdoors we have. Old trade brokers, cultural exchanges, research partnerships. If the official council is compromised, we need alternate lines in." She turned to Dr. Ndlovu. "Lien, begin deep scans on the star. I want to know exactly how much time the Talmeri have and how close we can get before we start cooking." She looked to Amira. "Ensign Solanki, you're on liaison duty with any Talmeri signals we catch. Your language scores are highest. If anyone calls for help, I want you to hear it first." "Yes, Captain," Amira said. Hours became a day, then 2, then 3. Vorusk ships shifted in slow patterns, adjusting their blockade nets. Talmeri transmissions, when they slipped past the Vorusk censorship filters, carried a note of mounting desperation. Arturo and his small team sat hunched over translator suites, parsing the emotional undercurrents beneath formal phrases. "They're scared," Arturo said during one late-night briefing, eyes shadowed. "But they're divided. Some think we're just another predator circling, waiting for the Vorusk to weaken them. Others remember our trade missions, our joint research. They want us to help. They're arguing among themselves about whether accepting evacuation is an act of cowardice or survival. Can we reach anyone sympathetic in their government?" Kade's image asked from the holotable. He had remained with the larger fleet, hanging back at the edge of the system, ready to move in if needed. "We have a line to a Counselor Leroy," Arturo said. "Technically a medic and community leader, not high in the power hierarchy, but respected. They've been trying to organize local shelters against radiation surges. They want more data on the star. They also mentioned a friend, a dockworker named Kelriin, living in one of the coastal arcologies most at risk from direct flare impact." Amira's heart leaped. She forced herself to keep her voice level. "Can we establish direct contact?" "We're trying," Arturo said. "Vorusk are jamming some frequencies and monitoring others. But local Talmeri mesh is more resilient than the Vorusk accounted for. Old habits of redundancy. We might be able to slip a narrowband through." Kade nodded. "Do it. Meanwhile, we're not waiting forever on their council. The Loom needs to be deployed before the next big flare, or there may not be much left to save." Dr. Ndlovu brought up her latest models. The holographic star above the table churned, its surface riven with active regions. "We have a major event building on the far side," she said. "Within 5 days, maybe 3, a flare powerful enough to strip half of Selyrion's atmosphere could erupt. If the planet happens to be facing the wrong way when it hits, coastal cities will be hammered by radiation. Our only chance to blunt it is to get the loom in place before it peaks." "That means moving closer," Captain Sato said, "right past that Vorusk line. They ran simulations. They argued probabilities. Best case, Doctor," Ndlovu said. "We wrap the loom around the star's magnetic field, redistribute the flare's energy along safer lines, and buy the Talmeri years. Worst case, we trigger a premature flare in the wrong direction and make everything worse." Kade watched the swirling projections. "Is there a middle case where we do nothing and the star obligingly waits until everyone is comfortable?" Dr. Ndlovu's mouth quirked. "No. Then we act," he said. He issued orders. The Sol Defense Armada advanced, slowly, arraying its ships in a wide arc that extended beyond the Vorusk blockade. It was not a wall. It was something stranger, less familiar to the militaristic Vorusk. A corridor. Channels were marked in space, with beacons and encrypted pulse codes, advertising safe lanes for evacuation ships. "If the Talmeri want to leave," Kade said, "we'll make sure they can." The Vorusk did not like that. On the 4th day, Vorusk raiders tested the human line, darting in toward one of the newly established corridors. On the Endeavor's bridge, alarms chimed. "Flotilla at bearing 321, closing on Corridor Delta," the tactical officer reported. "Weapons hot." "Any Talmeri traffic in that lane?" Sato asked. "One freighter, unarmed, carrying civilian transponders. They've broadcast a distress call." Arturo's voice was tight. "If the Vorusk intercept them, they'll make an example of them, publicly, to discourage others from trying." Sato did not wait for further data. "Route our course to intercept. Darzi, prepare boarding teams. Ndlovu, Noah, keep an eye on our exposure to the star. We may have to sprint in and out." The Endeavor surged forward, its engines flaring. Vorusk ships adjusted, some turning to meet it, others pressing toward the helpless freighter. "Ensign Solanki," Sato said, "open a channel to that freighter. Tell them to hold their course and their nerve." Amira's hands flew. "Channel open. This is the ISS Far Step Endeavor to Talmeri vessel. Translation: Singing Tides. We see you. Stay on your current vector." "We are coming," a voice answered, wavering, thick with the Talmeri's musical cadence. "We see your light," the captain of the Singing Tides said. "Our children are on board, the Vorusk." "Will not touch you if they value their hulls," Sato cut in. "Trust us." The Vorusk did not. They continued closing, intent on demonstrating the futility of defiance. Kade's voice came over the fleet net, terse. "Endeavor, you are clear to engage. Non-lethal if possible. Make this a statement, not a massacre." Sato smiled without humor. "Copy that, Admiral." The next minutes were a blur of schooling maneuvers that would be replayed in tactical academies for decades. The Endeavor slid between the Singing Tides and the lead Vorusk raider, presenting its heavily shielded flank. It fired a spread of ion disruptors, not calibrated to lethal intensity, but tuned to overload the raider's control systems. At the same time, it launched a cloud of drones that bloomed into dazzling distraction flares, confusing targeting arrays. The raider's first volley glanced off Endeavor's shields, making the deck hum. The second never came. Its weapons grid went dark under the ion barrage. Sergeant Darzi's Marines stood by in drop pods, ready to board if any Vorusk tried to grapple. Second raider adjusting vector. Tactical reported, trying to swing around and hit the freighter from the other side. "Noah, give me a slingshot," Sato said. Noah's fingers flew over the engineering console. "Diverting extra power to portside thrusters. Brace." The Endeavor lurched in a tight arc that would have torn a less robust ship apart, coming around in front of the second raider, its own mass now a moving wall. "Ensign Solanki," Sato said, "thread us through that gap on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Amira's mind narrowed to a line. The narrow, safe passage between a swirling radiation pocket and the edge of a Vorusk minefield. She adjusted their trajectory by fractions, felt the ship respond. The Endeavour skimmed past the second raider close enough that its hull sensors screamed proximity warnings. Darzy's Marines launched 2 pods in their wake, attaching like barnacles to the raider's belly. Within minutes, Vorusk gun crews found themselves staring down the barrels of human shock rifles. The singing tide slipped through the improvised corridor, its engines straining. On Selyrion's surface, in a coastal arcology battered by tidal storms, Kelriin watched the feed on a communal display. They did not consider themselves politically astute. They knew cargo vectors and tide patterns, not the intricate dances of fleets, but they knew courage when they saw it. The human ship moved like a living thing, interposing itself again and again between danger and the fragile. They reached up, fingers touching the small starweave pendant hanging at their throat. "You see?" Leroy said beside them, eyes wide. "I told you." The humans remembered. Kelriin made a soft sound that might have been a laugh, might have been a sob. The Vorusk line stiffened after that engagement. Warlord Kharzun railed at his subordinates, then at the Talmeri Council. "The humans are undermining stability," he growled over a secure channel patched into the council chamber. "They encourage flight. They embolden radicals." Councillor Savak, whose caution had curdled into fear, wrung their hands. "We did not ask them to come," they said. "We can petition them to leave." "Petition?" Kharzun spat. "You will do more than petition. You will denounce them, publicly. You will declare that any who accept their help are traitors. Otherwise," he let the threat hang. Savak looked around the chamber. Some councillors nodded, eager to appease. Others looked down, torn. Leroy, who sat in the back rows as a non-voting advisor, met Savak's gaze steadily. "These humans are willing to risk their lives to save ours," Leroy said quietly. "Can we say the same?" Savak flinched. "We cannot provoke war. War is upon us whether we acknowledge it or not," Leroy replied. "Between the Star and the Vorusk, the only question is who stands with us when the flares come." Below the council chamber, in shelter bays hastily carved deeper into Selyrion's crust, families huddled. Radiation levels on the surface had spiked twice in as many days. Each surge forced more Talmeri underground, compressing their oceans of culture into crowded, humming caverns. Kelriin walked among them, carrying medical kits, helping Leroy hand out damp cloths and reassurance. "There is still time," they told frightened children. "We have survived storms before." In their pocket, the small comm device Arturo's team had slipped into the local mesh buzzed. They ducked into a side passage and answered. A human voice, distorted slightly by encryption, spilled out, "This is the ISS Farstep Endeavour. We have a narrow window to move people during a predicted lull between flares. Local leaders can designate priority groups for evacuation. We need volunteers to coordinate flows to the launch platforms." Kelriin stared at the device. They saw again a station corridor filling with smoke, a door grinding shut, a tiny hand reaching. They did not hesitate. "I will do it," they said. At that same moment, on the Endeavour, Amira heard the translation come through and felt something crack open in her chest. The voice was older now, roughened by time and hardship, but the cadence was unmistakable. "This is Kelriin?" she asked, breaking protocol to cut into the channel. There was a pause. "This is Kelriin," the Talmeri replied cautiously. "Who is this?" "Amira Solanki," she said. "Port Miradeen, docking ring C." Silence. Then a soft, incredulous sound. "You lived," Kelriin said. I wondered. The messages stopped coming. "The war with the Vorusk disrupted a lot of networks," Amira said, "but I never stopped trying." Her throat tightened. "We're here now. We're not leaving you to face this alone." On Selyrion. Kelriin pressed their forehead against the cool arcology wall. "I do not know if our council will agree," they said. "They are afraid of everything, of you, of the Vorusk, of our own star." "Then we go around them," Amira replied. "Leroy is already working with our liaison. We have corridors opening. The Vorusk will try to close them, but we've shown we can hold. Her voice softened. Kelrian, when you pulled me through that door, you didn't stop to ask if my parents had signed the right forms. You just moved. We're doing the same. Kelrian's glow flared bright in the shadowed passage. What do you need me to do? They asked. In the frantic hours that followed, a pattern emerged. Kelrian became an anchor point in the coastal arcology, organizing lines of evacuees, calming panicked crowds with their steady presence. Leroy coordinated with other medics, prioritizing the sick and vulnerable. Arturo's team relayed instructions, adjusting in real time as Vorusk ships shifted to block one corridor and left another inadvertently open. Amira juggled channels with ferocious focus, switching between Vorusk threats, Talmeri pleas, and fleet updates. She slept in snatches at her console. Sergeant Darzy's Marines escorted Talmeri shuttles through the chaos, sometimes riding shotgun in armored pods, sometimes quietly sabotaging Vorusk's sensor buoys to blind their pursuers. Doctor, Ndlovu and Noah watched the star. It's building, Ndlovu said on the second day of evacuations. That big flare we predicted is coming ahead of schedule. The magnetic field is knotted like a rope about to snap. When it goes, it will not be gentle. Kade's fleet had already begun deploying the Solaris Loom. Segments unfolded from the larger ships, extending delicate arms of conductive material like spiderweb threads. They positioned themselves in orbit around the star, creating a loose, vast frame. This is madness, muttered one of Kade's senior captains during a private channel. We're hanging experimental tech around an angry star while playing tag with an aggressive fleet. If either one sneezes in our direction, humanity has done madder things for less, Kade replied. We've thrown ships into black holes just to see what would happen. This, at least, is for something. He thought of all the evacuee lists scrolling past his terminals. Talmeri names, each one as complex as any human's, each attached to a beating heart, a web of relationships, a place in a culture. Give me your status, he said to Noah on the Endeavor. We're linked to 7 other Loom segments, Noah answered, fingers flying over controls. Field harmonics are within tolerance. The star's flux is loud, Admiral. Very loud. We're pushing our sensor arrays to the limit. Can we redirect a major flare? He asked. In theory, she said, if we catch it early enough, if our anchors hold. If the Vorusk don't decide to shoot at us while we're in the middle of it. Lots of ifs. Welcome to command, he said. We work with ifs. Warlord Kharzun watched the loom unfolding with a mix of grudging respect and rising alarm. They mean to interfere with the star itself, he said to his officers. If they succeed, they extend the Talmeri's window for resistance. If they fail, they may destabilize the system in ways that hurt us as well. A junior strategist cleared their throat. We could target the Loom segments, destroy them before they fully integrate, Kharzun considered. Destroying experimental human equipment carried risks. Humans were unpredictable when angered, but allowing it to function might embolden both them and the Talmeri. He called up a model of the system. Human ships were positioned in a wide arc that made a direct assault costly. We will test them, he said. Send a flanking group to harry their outer segments, nothing overtly escalatory. Let us see how much they are willing to risk for this. Loom. Vorusk raiders peeled off from the blockade, arcing toward the Loom's outer anchors. Sensors on the Endeavor pinged. Vorusk movement, tactical reported. Bearing 590, moving toward Loom segment Alpha 7. That's one of ours, Noah said sharply. If they hit it while it's sinking, the feedback could cascade. Kade's voice cut in on the fleet net. Endeavor, you are closest. Intercept. Sato did not wait. Amira, plot us a path. Darzy, prep for possible boarding. Leanne, Noah, tell me how close we can skim the star without frying everyone on board. Dr. Ndlovu's eyes flicked across sensor readouts. We can dive another 15% deeper into the gravity well for a short burst. Any more, and we risk hull integrity. Give me that 15, Sato said. We'll slingshot around the star, come up under the raiders, and scare them off the segment. It's not a planet. Noah muttered. You cannot just treat it like a handy billiard ball. You once told me stars are just big balls of plasma, Sato replied. Big ball, small ball, it's all gravity. Amira? Amira's mouth was dry. This was the kind of maneuver simulator instructors had labeled with words like theoretical and career limiting. She plotted it anyway. The Endeavour dove inward, its frame groaning as gravity and radiation bit into it. Shields flared, then dimmed, as Noah redirected every spare watt to field stabilization. From Selyron's surface, some Talmeri who dared look up through the heavy filter screens saw a brief, bright line streak across their sky, too swift and precise to be a natural phenomenon. The Endeavour curved around the star, emerging on a vector the Vorusk raiders had not anticipated. Its opening volley did not target their hulls. Instead, it fired a salvo of gravitic pulses that nudged them off course by tiny but critical angles. One raider's engines flared asymmetrically. It veered, missing the loom segment by a wide margin. The others corrected, but now the Endeavour was between them and their target. Kharzun snarled as his tactical displays lit up. They treat our fleet like toys, he growled. Enough. Target that loom segment anyway. If we cannot have this system on our terms, no one will. His gunnery officers hesitated. That could destabilize the star further, Warlord. Our ships are within. Fire, Kharzun snapped. On their readouts, Dr. Ndlovu watched power spikes lance toward the loom. Impact in 12 seconds, Tactical said. 11. Can we move it? Kade asked. Noah's mind ran numbers. Not laterally, not fast enough. But we might be able to use the hit. Kade stared at her. Explain, quickly. The loom is designed to catch and redirect energy, Noah said. If we adjust its field coupling, we might be able to shunt the blast's impact into the star's own magnetic lines, like pushing a wave back into the ocean instead of letting it crash on the shore. Do it, Kade said. Noah's hands blurred. The loom's field parameters shifted in response. The Vorusk volley struck. For a terrifying instant, the nearest loom segment flared white, overloaded. Feedback arced along its frame. Then, the new couplings grabbed hold. The energy fell into resonance with the star's own throbbing pulse and sank. The star jolted. On Selyron's dayside, the sky rippled with auroral curtains. Compasses whirled. For a dreadful minute, every living thing on the surface felt a pressure in their bones, a sense of vast, alien movement. Then, slowly, the pressure eased. Field integrity holding, Noah whispered. We did it. We actually did it. The loom absorbed and redirected most of that impact. Dr. Ndlovu exhaled. The flare buildup has shifted. We've altered the timing and location. It will still happen, but with less direct impact on Selyron's most populated regions. We bought them time. On the Vorusk flagship, Kharzun stared at his screens in disbelief. They caught our shot, he said, and used it? A strategist swallowed. Warlord, if the humans can moderate the star's worst outbursts, the Talmeri may not be as desperate. They may not accept your terms. Kharzun's claws dug into the arm of his command chair. Then we will give them a different reason to accept. Prepare to deploy ground forces. If the Talmeri will not surrender to the inevitability of the sky, they will surrender to the reality of boots on their soil. On Selyrion, evacuation efforts had doubled in intensity as sensor readings wobbled. Kelriin moved like a steady current through waves of chaos, guiding families toward shuttles, ensuring each child's hand found an adult's. Between her tasks, Amira stole moments to talk with them over the crackling comms. I wish I could be down there, she said once, watching a grainy image of Kelriin's glowing form on her console. You are up there, Kelriin replied, catching fire so it does not fall on us. That seems important. I remember your burns, Amira said softly. How badly you were hurt. Kelriin glanced at the faint scars on their limbs, barely visible under their shifting patterns now. They healed, they said. You send good doctors, Amira smiled. We try. The next crisis came without warning. Vorusk dropships punched through the atmosphere on steep, fiery trails, aiming for key arcologies that had shown signs of defiance. Kharzun had decided that fear from above was no longer enough. He wanted boots echoing in Talmeri halls. Ground incursion detected. Tactical announced on the Endeavor. Multiple vectors. Targets include coastal arcologies, Theta-Nine, and Delta-4. Our own marine teams are in orbit. But we can't be in two places at once. Amira's blood ran cold. Theta-Nine was Kelrion's arcology. Sergeant Darcy's voice came over the internal net. "We're ready to drop, Captain. Just say the word." Sato's jaw clenched. "We cannot intercept all those dropships. If we divert everything to Theta-Nine, Delta-4 will fall. If we split our forces, we risk losing both." Voices rose in the tactical planning channel. Some argued for focusing on the more densely populated arcology. Others for the one with critical infrastructure. Kade cut through the noise. "We honor debts, but we also honor lives we do not know," he said. "We'll divide, but not equally. Darcy, take your crack squads to Theta-Nine. The rest of the fleet will assign secondary teams to Delta-4. Arturo, signal any Talmeri defense forces still capable of fighting. This will have to be joint." He paused, then added quietly, "Amira, this will put our Marines in direct harm's way. You understand why we can't send everything to your friend." Her throat tightened, but she nodded. "Yes, sir. Kelrion would not accept help that damns others in their place." Darcy's Marines loaded into drop pods. Each pod held a tight-knit squad, faces set, weapons checked. "Remember," Darcy said over the squad channel as the pod sealed, "we are not occupiers. We're guests fighting in someone else's house. Respect that. Protect civilians first, pride second." The pods fired, streaking through Selyrian's atmosphere like a new kind of meteor swarm. In Theta-Nine, Kelrion had just shepherded the last group of evacuees into a shuttle bay when the first Vorusk dropship howled overhead, its wake rattling the entire structure. "Vorusk!" someone screamed. "They're coming here." Panic surged. Some Talmeri tried to stampede back into the corridors, away from the launch platforms, as if deeper into the arcology's bones meant safety. Others froze, their bioluminescent patterns flaring in chaotic colors. Kelrion climbed onto a stack of crates, amplifying their voice through a local speaker. "Stop," they commanded. "Listen." Miraculously, enough did. "We have lived our lives by the tides," Kelrion said, voice steady. "When storms came, we went to high ground or to deep caves. Together, we did not scatter across the rocks. The humans are here to help us leave. The Vorusk are here to keep us afraid. Choose who you will trust. But do not get trampled in your own fear." Leroy, standing at their side, nodded. "Those who wish to fight, stand with me. Those who wish to leave, follow Kelrion. There is no shame in either choice today, only different forms of courage." Roughly half the crowd moved toward the shuttles. The rest clustered, frightened but resolved. Behind Leroy, Kelrion jumped down, heart-hammering. Somewhere above, metal screamed as the Vorusk dropship made contact with the arcology. "Amira," they whispered into their comm, though they did not know if the channel remained stable through so much interference. "If you can hear this, now would be a good time." Amira heard. The Endeavor's displays lit up with incoming telemetry from the drop pods. "Pods crossing upper atmosphere," Tactical said. "Entry heat nominal. Landing in 30 seconds. Selyrian sky lit up with streaking fire as human Marines fell. Vorusk troops stormed the main concourse of Theta-Nine, armed with energy rifles that spat crackling bolts. Talmeri defenders, hastily armed with converted mining tools and a few outdated pulse weapons, scrambled to form lines. The first clash was brutal. Vorusk weapons tore through cover. Talmeri fell, their glow fading. Then Darcy's pod smashed through the associated gravity wells, using precisely calculated vectors to hit auxiliary docks and maintenance bays rather than central squares. Pod doors blew open. Marines surged out. Smoke, shouting, the snap of gunfire. The Marines moved in disciplined pairs and squads, covering one another, treating civilians as precious cargo rather than obstacles. Darcy himself led the push toward the central concourse, his armor streaked with scorch marks. He saw a Vorusk squad advancing on a group of unarmed Talmeri children, weapons raised. He did not think. He moved. His squad laid down a blistering volley. Vorusk armor sparked and buckled. One went down. Another pivoted, returning fire. Darcy felt a burning line across his side, but stayed on his feet. "Human soldiers," one of the stunned Talmeri whispered, wide-eyed. "We're not here to take your world," Darcy grunted, glancing at them briefly. "We're here to make sure you have one to leave." He keyed his comm. "Endeavor, this is Ground Squad Alpha. Engaged Vorusk forces in Theta-Nine. Civilians present. We could use some lovely orbital support, the non-lethal kind." "On the bridge," Sato nodded. "Target Vorusk concentrations with stun ordnance," she ordered. "Knock them on their backs. Keep collateral minimal. They chose to bring this fight into someone else's home. They can live or not with the embarrassment." Pulses of tightly tuned concussion waves rained down, slamming into Vorusk troops, throwing them off balance, rattling their senses. Under that cover, Talmeri defenders surged, emboldened by the unexpected alliance. Their bioluminescent patterns, synchronized in bands of determined blue, an old cultural signal for solidarity. In the chaos, Kelriin and Leroy got the last wave of evacuees to the shuttles. Kelriin hesitated at the ramp of the final craft, looking back at the arcologies' curved corridors that had been their whole world. "Go," Leroy urged. "You have other tides to cross now." "You?" Kelriin asked. "I stay," Leroy said. "For those who cannot leave yet. Someone must be here when the next wave comes." Kelriin's throat tightened. They reached up, fingers brushing Leroy's cheek. "Then may the quiet waters find you again." They turned and boarded. Amira tracked that shuttle's signature on her display. It had no personal label, just an anonymous alphanumeric code. But she knew. "Captain," she said, "we have a shuttle from Theta-Nine clearing atmosphere. It's heading toward Corridor Beta, near our position." "Vorusk pursuits?" Sato asked. "2 interceptors," Tactical replied. "They're fast. The shuttle's engines are overloaded, just staying ahead." "Not this time," Amira whispered. "Louder," she said. "We can move to screen them, but we'll expose ourselves to crossfire." Kade's voice came through, hard. "Do it," we promised. "No half measures." The Endeavor pivoted, swinging into a vector that placed it directly between the pursuit and the shuttle. Vorusk interceptors adjusted, their pilots too angry to break off. "Shields up," Sato said. "Fire a warning spread. Let them know we're serious." The Endeavor's guns spoke. Several Vorusk shots glanced off its hull, but its armor held. One interceptor took a glancing hit and spiraled away. The other, more stubborn or more reckless, kept coming. On the shuttle's cramped deck, Talmeri huddled together. Kelriin stood near the front, one hand on the bulkhead, feeling the tremors through the metal. "Look," whispered a child, pointing at the view screen. The human ship loomed there, vast and strange, interposing itself like a mountain. "They came," Kelriin said softly. The Vorusk interceptor pilot saw that too. They also saw that if they continued, they would have to either back down or fire directly at a human warship, escalating the conflict. For a moment, their talons tensed. Kharzun's voice crackled over their link. "Withdraw," he snapped. "We will not be drawn into full-scale war over one shuttle. There will be others we can make examples of." The interceptor peeled away. The shuttle shuddered as it passed into the human-protected corridor. Sensors on the Endeavor confirmed its safe entry into the evacuation line. Amira sat back in her chair, eyes burning. She allowed herself only one heartbeat of relief before turning back to her instruments. There were other dots on the screen, other lives. The battle for Selyrion continued for days, not as a single cataclysmic clash, but as a series of sharp, desperate engagements. The Vorusk tried to tighten their blockade. The humans punched holes. The star rumbled. The loom flexed and held, absorbing some outbursts, redirecting others. In homes deep beneath the sea, Talmeri families debated, sometimes bitterly, whether to leave the world that had shaped them. Arturo moderated tense video councils between human officers and Talmeri leaders, balancing honor and pragmatism. "We cannot take everyone at once," he said during one, voice gentle. "We are building a bridge in the middle of a flood, but we can get many, and we can keep building as long as the loom holds." Counselor Savak, once so cautious, now sounded tired. "We were afraid of panic," they said, "afraid of losing ourselves in the void. Now I see. We fear the wrong thing. Extinction without choice is worse than leaving with dignity." Savak's eyes glimmered faintly. "Tell your admiral, we accept your assistance." Officially, Kade received that message in his flag cabin. He read it twice, then forwarded it to the wider fleet. "You heard the council," he said. They asked. "We answer. All ships, ramp up evacuation capacity. I want every shuttle we can spare running that corridor, and keep one eye on the loom at all times. If it falters, this whole operation becomes a race against fire." They worked accordingly. Human crews established makeshift way stations in the shadow of Selyrion's outer moons, refueling shuttle engines, treating radiation sickness, offering Talmeri bewildering new foods. There were moments of culture shock and awkwardness. On one ship, a human cook watched a group of Talmeri regarding a pot of stew with polite confusion. "It's hot," one said. "We eat mostly at ambient ocean temperature." The cook shrugged. "We can turn it down," he said. "But trust me, on a day like this, a little warmth in your bones can feel like defiance." The Talmeri tried it. Their glow patterns shifted in surprise, and slowly, appreciation. "You give us warmth, while your machines catch fire for us," one murmured. "You are a strange species." The worst flare came on the 9th day. Dr. Ndlovu had seen it building, a monstrous knot in the star's field. "It's going to release whether we like it or not," she said to Kade over the net. "We've bought time, we've redirected smaller bursts, but this is the main event." "Options?" he asked. "We can try to channel it away from Selyrian's populated hemisphere," she said. "We can use the loom to shape and delay. But stabilizing modulus is at the edge of what our materials can handle. If the loom segments fail, they might fragment into the star, or lash out unpredictably. In other words, this is what we built it for," Noah said quietly. "Right here." "Exactly," Ndlovu replied. Kade looked around at the faces in his command space, human and holographically projected. "This is the climax," he said. "Not just for this mission. For the story we tell about ourselves. We can back off, save our ships, and watch a world burn a little slower. Or we can hold the line and see if we're actually as good as we like to think we are." No one suggested retreat. "Order all non-essential ships to maximum safe distance," he said. "Pull evac corridors back just beyond the worst projected radiation belts. The loom anchor ships and protective escorts will remain in close. We ride this out." The loom lit up. Sensors recorded the star's surface bulging, magnetic lines snapping, plasma swirling into towering loops. The first wave of radiation slammed into human shields, making them flare dangerously. Noah's voice was calm and taut as she issued commands to the loom's control interfaces. "Segment Beta-9, increase field resonance. Gamma-3, you're lagging. Sync to new phase. Watch your thermal loads. We're going to slingshot this flare-down system away from Selyrian's orbital track." On Selyrian's surface, the sky turned strange colors. Auroras writhed even near the equator. Some Talmeri wailed, convinced this was the end. Others crouched in shelters, holding hands, listening to human and Talmeri voices alike over loudspeakers, assuring them that the shield was holding. In Theta-Nine's half-ruined concourse, Leroy stood with remnants of their defenders, watching the filtered sky through a cracked dome. "Do you believe them?" a young Talmeri asked. "The humans?" Leroy looked at the sky, then at the small comm device in their hand, through which they heard Noah's strained, precise orders, Dr. Ndlovu's muttered calculations, Sato's steady commands. "Yes," Leroy said simply. "I do." The flare crested. The loom met it. In orbit, human crews gritted their teeth as consoles sparked and hulls trembled. Energy surged along the loom's frame, seeking paths of least resistance. Carefully tuned fields bent it, curved it, shunted it along pre-planned arcs. Selyrion still took a hit. Some of its upper atmosphere boiled. One of its small, uninhabited moons lost the last of its thin air. But the worst of it went sliding past, down system, where it would dissipate in empty space. On the Endeavor, alarm screamed, then gradually fell silent. "Status?" Sato demanded. Noah sagged in her chair, sweat dripping down her face. "We lost 3 loom segments," she said hoarsely. "Their frames overheated and had to be jettisoned, but the remaining network held. Radiation levels at Selyrian's surface were high, but survivable. We just kept an extinction-level event from becoming one." Dr. Ndlovu's voice trembled. "We did it. We bought them decades, maybe longer, if the star behaves." Cheers erupted across the human fleet. Some were wild and relieved, some quiet and awed. On Selyrion, Talmeri stepped out of shelters, blinking at a sky that still roiled but did not kill. Many fell to their knees, not in worship of humans or their machines, but in an overwhelmed gratitude that their children would see another tide. In a refugee bay on a human ship, Kelriin stood by a window, hand pressed to the transparent alloy. Their glow shimmered with complicated patterns. Amira approached quietly. "You always did like watching docks," she said. Kelriin turned. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Time had altered them both. Amira was taller, her face a little sharper, her eyes lined with strain and responsibility. Kelriin's scars had faded, but new lines of weariness traced their features. "You grew," Kelriin said, stating the obvious because it felt safer than all the unsaid words. "So did you," Amira replied. Kelriin reached up, touching the starweave pendant at their throat. "You gave me this," they said, "once. And then your people gave me back my life. Twice. Now." Amira shook her head. "The first time, you were the one who moved. We're just keeping the balance sheet honest." Kelriin tilted their head, curious. "Balance sheet? A way we talk about debts," Amira said. "Who owes what to whom?" Kelriin considered that. "If we count debts this way," they said slowly, "we will always be chasing each other, never resting. I would rather count something else." "Like what?" Amira asked. Kelriin moved a little closer to the window. Outside, streams of shuttles moved between ships and the planet, tiny motes in the dark. Human vessels stood guard. Talmeri lights flickered across docking bays. "Like stepping toward each other," Kelriin said. "You stepping toward us now, us stepping toward you later. Neither because of numbers, but because that is what we do." Amira smiled, feeling something in her chest unclench. "I like your accounting better," she said. The immediate crisis had passed, but Selyrian's story was not neatly tied up. The loom had held this time. It would need maintenance, reinforcement. The star remained volatile. Evacuations would continue for years, shifting slowly from emergency scrambles to organized resettlement. Some Talmeri would choose to stay, hardening their habitats and embracing the risk in exchange for never leaving their ancestral seas. The Vorusk, stung and chastened, withdrew their overt presence, but did not disappear. They licked their wounds on the other side of the ashen rift, plotting, reweaving their strategies. They would be back in some form. In the corridors of human power, there were arguments. Some said the resources poured into Selyrion had been too great, the risks too high. Kade stood before one such assembled group, footage of flares and evacuation lines playing behind him. "You want metrics?" he said. "Fine. We gained real-time data on stellar stabilization that will be invaluable when any of our own worlds face similar threats. We established a durable alliance with a species caught between a dying star and a predator. We demonstrated to the Vorusk and others that preying on the vulnerable will not go unopposed." He paused, then added, "But beyond all that, we affirmed something about ourselves, that if someone, anyone, steps between our children and a closing door, we remember. And when their time of need comes, we don't send a memo. We send a fleet. That, ultimately, was the story that spread. In human taverns on outer stations, merchants told it with embellishments, how human ships had danced with a star, how marines had dropped like falling stars themselves. On Selyrion's new coastal enclaves, built on worlds far from their original sun, Talmeri elders sang of the time when strange, sharp-boned allies had wrapped a net of light around a raging star and held back the sky. In a quiet chamber on one resettlement world, Kelriin and Amira sat with a group of Talmeri children and human visitors, telling the story together. "Weren't you scared?" a human boy asked Kelriin. "When you crawled under that door on Port Miradeen?" Kelriin smiled, their glow flickering with remembered adrenaline. "Yes," they said. "I was terrified. That is what made it matter. Courage without fear is not courage. It is just habit. But when you are afraid, and you move anyway, because someone small is counting on you." Their gaze drifted briefly to Amira. "That is different." "And weren't you scared?" a Talmeri girl asked Amira. "When you flew your ship so close to the star?" Amira thought of the loom's frames humming around them, the way her hands had trembled over the controls, the hum of overloaded shields. "Yes," she said honestly, "every time. But I kept thinking about standing on that station, watching Kelrian work below. They moved toward danger for me. It made it easier to move toward danger for them." The children listened, eyes wide. The night beyond the windows was filled with unfamiliar constellations, different from both human and Talmeri skies of origin. The combined colony still smelled of new metal and fresh-cut plantings. Outside, the Solaris Loom around Selyrion star continued its slow, careful dance. The old sun would not last forever. Nothing did. But its death would not come as a sudden, implacable hammer blow on an unprepared people. It would be a long, managed dusk. Somewhere in that fading light, in the protected lanes of a system that had once seemed doomed, ships bearing both human and Talmeri colors moved side by side. The debt had not been paid in full. It could never really be, not in any meaningful numeric sense, but something better had taken root. A shared understanding that an act of unthinking courage on a distant station could ripple out, through time and space, into fleets and megastructures, and a defiant refusal to let a world die alone.